All right, here we go. Let's finish this off. Let's do some actual simulating. I just finished a little bit ago the part one of this, and this is going to be part two where we're actually going to do some actual simulations in Craft of Exile. No more beating around the bush. Let's get into doing some actual simulations. There's one more thing I kind of want to say first, but I'll save it and I'll come back for later. I want to talk a little bit more about the math for lazy people, but we'll save that and we'll come back to it if I remember. All right, so let's actually just go ahead and get into doing some simulations. If you want a long intro, go back to my part one if you haven't watched it already. There's a long intro there. Intro finished. All right, let's simulate some things. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to open up the simulator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with very simple cases, and then I'm going to slowly work up to more and more complex and more advanced cases. Okay. The first point I'm going to show is just kind of like rederiving, like showing you how the simulator, maybe you're somebody who just doesn't know anything about how any of this stuff works. I'm going to show you first, like how the simulator kind of rederives these probabilities. This is what I was talking about at the end of the last video. All right, so first let's start real quickly in the calculator again. So from last video, I'm going to be dealing with Stygian Vice belts, and let's say I'm trying to get some life and I'm trying to get some resistances. I'm trying to push into the end game, so I want to get like tier 1s and tier 2s and stuff like that. All right. So let's just get rid of this for now. So I'm in the calculator on Craft of Exile. I'm in the calculator, and I've got Stygian Vice picked, and I had a couple prefixes and suffixes. Okay, let's start with something very simple here. Let's get rid of the resistances. We'll just do one resistance. We'll do cold resistance tier 1. Let's not even do that, okay? Let's just start with just plus number percent to maximum life. And we've got it set to tier 1, okay? So this is going to be our first most basic example. So let's say, for example, let's say this is just for learning, okay? I want to roll an item and I've got a Stygian Vice. It's at least eye level 64, and I want to hit tier 1 maximum life, okay? And let's say I want to use a Chaos Orb to hit this, all right? So in the calculator, as I mentioned in the last video, if you basically click this Chaos Orb, then Craft of Exile is like intelligent enough to understand the mechanics of how a Chaos Orb works, and it knows what I'm looking for, and it knows the probability. The probability of this roll is 1.939% if you hit a prefix. Anytime you hit a prefix on a roll, you've got a 2% chance of getting a tier 1 life. And it knows how Chaos Orbs work. So the calculator is telling me it knows that on average, it's going to take basically 27 Chaos Orbs. Okay, so it basically takes 27 tries on average. So you could figure out the chance from that, I guess, is at 3.8. Yeah, that sounds right. Just from my head. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's open up another Craft of Exile. Okay, so I've got that there. So let's open up a second Craft of Exile, and this time, what we're going to do is we're going to use the simulator, and we're going to simulate the same thing. Now, this again, okay, this is unnecessary. I don't need to do this because in my calculator, I can already figure it out. But let's just go ahead and put the same thing in the simulator, and let's see what happens. You can probably guess, but we're going to just do it because we're working up from the basics and we're going more advanced. Okay, so I go into Craft of Exile, I go to the simulator, and belts are in jewelry for some reason, and then click on the belt. I want to do a Stygian Vice, and I'm just going to always pick pretty much item level 100 for everything because whatever. All right. And I already know things that trip some of these things up, but I'm not going to do it yet because I'm going to just show the full process of doing it. Some of the simulations I'll show kind of the full process, and then some of them I've got a couple over here that I've already kind of set up in advance because they're kind of more complicated. And basically, this video is, again, probably going to be about 30 minutes long, and I'm just going to basically cover as much as I possibly can. I'm going to get through as much as I can, covering a bunch of different scenarios and showing the simulations, and we'll just see where we end up. All right, so I'm in the simulator. All right, so let's look at how we do simulations for someone that's never seen this or done this before, okay? So simulation, a bunch of crazy words that are kind of probably complicated. Simulation, sequence configuration. This right here is so this is our item that we're starting with. Starting item is item level 100 Stygian Vase, okay? Now, this is where we're setting up our simulation is right here. And you can see, okay, this mode configuration. That's setting up your simulation, what the parameters of the simulation are, okay? So So we've got our item. Now, what do we want to do with our item? What we want to do basically is use a chaos. We want to simulate using chaos orbs over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to choose a method. I'm going to go to basic currency. By the way, I may get stuck at certain points in this video. Sometimes, you get stuck when you're doing this. It's a little complicated. Sometimes you get stuck. If I happen to get stuck, I might actually edit out of the video, but I'm hoping it won't happen because I have messed with this a fair bit now. So, but we're going to do it live. All right. So I've chosen a chaos orb. So this step 1 is going to use a chaos orb on my item right here. Okay. Now, after we use the chaos orb, it needs to know what's called, it's like a success condition. We'll call it a success condition. Okay. My success condition is I want to hit tier 1 life. Okay. So I'm going to type life in here. I'm going to go to prefix plus number to maximum life. And then right here, there is a minimum tier. So I want tier 1. So my minimum tier is 1 because I want tier 1. And count min, I don't think I need that if I'm doing just one affix. And that should be all. Okay. On success, continue, which is fine. And on failure, loop. And actually, when you hover over it, it says do the current step again. So what this means is this is what's going to happen in the simulation. The first thing that's going to happen is the method, it's going to use a chaos orb on the item. Then it's going to check the condition. It's going to see if I've hit my tier 1 life or not. On success, so if it did hit my tier 1, then we're going to consider it a success. So we're defining the item that we're basically looking for in the end. The item I want is an item that has tier 1 life. So it's just success. And when you have it set up this way and continue, it just kind of like, it just registers it as a success. And then it just keeps simulating after that. I think you'll kind of understand as we keep going. Okay. On failure, so if I don't get a maximum life roll, then hit it with another chaos and keep doing it until we get the on success, continue. And basically, when you get more of these, what you're going to do is you're going to add these sequence steps, and it's going to keep doing lots of stuff. And basically, when it gets to the end of all these steps, it's just considered a success. If this says on success, continue, it's just considered a success. Hopefully it'll make sense. But anyway, we'll start doing it. Now, okay, so let's start the simulation. And what it's going to, okay, so already we've got an error. We can't, this is what happens when you use this. You have to kind of figure some of these things out. Okay, sequencing error, step 1. I feel like this is going to happen to a lot of people. Okay, so we get an error. Step 1, item rarity needs to be rare for this action. Okay, and this is what it's showing. It's actually, Craft of Exile is absolutely amazing. Maybe I'm going to, talk a little bit of crap every once in a while on it, but overall, this is just such an amazing website. Whoever made this, you did an absolutely incredible job. Okay, so then it shows item state before the error is a plain white belt, and it needed to be rare. So what happened is we tried to use a chaos orb in our simulation on a white item. You're not allowed to use a chaos orb on a white item. So in order to fix this error, you're going to come on over here to your starting item, and you click these little arrows, and then you can change the rarity to a magic or a rare. Okay, let's make it a rare, and then we can start using chaos orbs on it. Okay, so we've got everything set up. Let's start the simulation. Okay, so now that we started the simulation is running, and it's just simulating using a chaos orb over and over and over and over and over again, and then it's checking to see if it hit the tier 1 maximum life or not. Okay, so actions here is basically how many simulations have been run. For the simple example, it's just how many times it's done the simulation. And then past is how many times our success condition, which was checking to see if we had a tier 1 life roll, if it was a success or not. So did it have the tier 1 life roll or not? Okay, so right now, out of about 6,000, soon to be 7,000 simulations, we've passed basically about 280 times out of 7,500. And if we look at our percentage, it's telling us the percentage is, how many passes out of how many simulations. So what's the percentage chance if you do everything I put in the simulation? What's the percentage chance that you're going to succeed and you're going to get your tier 1 life? The success, it's the number of passes over the number of actions divided by that gives us the percent. I'm pretty sure I got that right? And it's saying the percent chance is about 3.9-ish%. And it's telling us also the ratio is basically 1 out of 26. It's the same thing. Should be the passes divided by the number of simulations. Should be about 1 in 26, or if you want that in a percent, then it's going to be about 3.8 or so. And this is relatively stable. So we've only done about 15,000 simulations. It only takes 10 seconds or 30 seconds or something. And this number is like pretty stable. It's not really moving around. And the ratio is, around 1 out of 26, something like that. And here's our exact percentage chance. Okay, so we already kind of checked this before, okay? Because we were in the calculator and we, did, what a lot of people are going to kind of normally do. We already went in here. We said, what if I want just a tier 1 maximum life? And what if I want to do chaos spamming using chaos over and over again? And it just instantly tells you these probabilities and these odds. Instantly. It tells you instantly that the odds are exactly 3.829%. And on average, it's going to take you approximately 27 tries. 3.82. So about, let's call it 3.83 and 27. Now we simulated the exact same scenario and we've ended up with 3.8 and 6, 5, 7. It's trying to get that last little part of this decimal exactly. Oh, look where we're at. It just changed. So depending on how rare the success is, this is going to shift around a little bit. But as you can see, basically, the more simulations we run. So for example, in the last video, I gave the example of flipping a coin. The more times you flip a coin, it should start, if you count the number of heads and tails, it should start showing you and revealing closer and closer to the true probability of what's the probability of a heads and tails. It's 50-50%. And I think most people hopefully at least know that the more times you flip the coin, if you flip it 1,000,000 times, you should be getting pretty close to 50% heads, 50% tails. And that's exactly what's happening here. And we're getting this chance revealed to us. So this is what I was trying to kind of describe at the last video. And I'll come back and I'll just explain this line one more time. Okay. My personal view of simulation and the role of simulation is it's basically like it's math for lazy people. Okay. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, somehow, this program figured out the exact percentage chance. The way it did that is it knows exactly how a chaos orb works. It knows what the chances are that you'll hit a prefix. It knows the chances that you'll get 2 prefixes or 3 prefixes. It takes all of those probabilities and then it uses the probability of a tier 1 life roll, et cetera, and it figures it all. It just figures it out exactly by understanding how the underlying mathematics works and how the underlying item works. But you can also just simulate it and you don't have to know how anything works. You can be like the stupidest mathematical person. You don't know anything about math or probabilities. And as long as you can punch everything into the simulation correctly, if you let it simulate for long enough, you will figure out the percentage chance. Once you're at this point, once you figured out this percentage chance and this ratio, then you can figure out how much it's going to cost. So here, the ratio is 1 out of 27. The cost is basically, therefore, it's 27 chaos orbs. All right. So let's go ahead and stop it. I think basically that's a success at this point. And then this is the nice part here is it's also going to give you this breakdown of basically how much it cost for each success. Okay. Well, would you look at that? Would you just look at that? The cost per success is 27 chaos. That is the exact number that we had over here. Big surprise. Not surprised. That was kind of the expectation. So I'm glad. Okay. The video is working. I don't have to restart doing this video. Everything worked perfectly. So what we've done one last time is we've kind of derived the sort of lazy way. We've derived the probability and therefore we've derived how much it's going to cost to do this kind of craft and get our success. All right. Okay. So from there, if you've made it this far and you basically understand everything I just said, now all we have to do from this point is we just kind of start amping up the difficulty and the complexity of the crafts that we're trying to do. And then we just have to figure out how to use this simulator to kind of punch in all of these steps and how to get this to work to then simulate our idea that we have. And then before you go into the game, let's say you have a craft plan that you think you're going to spend 100 divine orbs or 200 divine or some crazy number of divine orbs on. Before you do that, you can just punch everything into the simulator, let it run 1,000,000 simulations, and you should be able to get a pretty accurate sense of how long it's going to take. and let me mention one final thing here, which is really nice about the simulator, is after you've simulated for more complex simulations and things that you might actually use, it will also show you every time you hit a success, it's going to show you the items that were created that were considered successes. So the first item that was considered a success looked like this. It had the T1 life roll, max life. It was rolled perfectly, and then it had all this other random stuff. And then the second time it hit a success, this is what the item looked like. And once you start using this and you learn exactly how to punch everything and use it, I feel like the simulator, it's like, what the emulator almost, you'd almost stop using it because the simulator is just so much more powerful and useful. If I was going to like emulate this, I'd have to sit there clicking it over and over, and I'd have to keep checking if it's a success or not. The simulator is just doing that for you. The emulator, maybe it still has some uses just to kind of start getting your juices flowing and start testing things out, but I don't know. All right, next. Okay, so let's work our way up. Let's do one more kind of really, let's do, where should we go next? Let's see here. So I've done basically one tier 1. Okay, let's try this now. Okay, so every time I'm going to do a simulation, I'm always going to talk about the basics of this. Okay, so we can see that a tier 1 maximum life roll is 1.939% chance. Okay, so let's say you wanted to craft an item that you were okay with either tier 1 or tier 2 maximum life. So I'm going to click both of these. Click both of these. Are they both clicked? Okay. And okay, there's 2 ways that you can figure out how much this is, to get a rough estimate of how much this is going to cost, how many chaos. Okay. The first way is you understand exactly the math and everything. So first, you know that, okay, if I want both of these, anytime you want 2 of the same one, of two of the same, like max life is the same tier 2 and tier 1. Basically, the probability, you're basically going to add these 2 probabilities together. So instead of being about 2%, it's going to be about 4%. All right. And then let's make this, we'll just stick with chaos, I guess. And then when they roll the chaos orb, they figure out, so the odds of the one that we just did before was basically 3.8%. Now it's telling us the odds of hitting it on a chaos orb are 7.6%. All right. And now if we go into our simulator, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to just change the minimum tier to 2. So let me do that here. All right, change it to 2. And let's start simulating. Okay, so this time we should end up with about 7.6%. Okay, I'll let that run for a second. Then, all right, the next thing we could do, let's open up a new craft. Let's do a new Craft of Exile. Okay, the next thing, let's start ramping up the complexity here a little bit. Okay, so let's see here. So I'll do another simulation on this one, and let's go back and look here. And this time, let's do where we kind of set out from the beginning of this video. Let's say I want tier 1 life. So on my prefix, I want to hit a tier 1 life. And on my suffix, I want to hit at least 2 tier 1 resistances. Now, once again, I am sorry, I should have probably looked this up before. I can't remember how you do or in the calculator. There's some way to say I want, okay, it's up here, I think. Is it here? Is it the G1 and the P1? I think. Shoot, I'm sorry, y'all. I think it's these buttons on the suffix. So I think this is saying on the suffix 1, you have to have this one. And on the suffix 2, you can have either one of these. Suffix group 2. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure there is a way to figure this out, but I'm not figuring out. So whatever. We won't even mess with it because this is about simulation, so we won't even mess with it. So let's say you want tier 1 life and you want at least 2 out of these 3 cold, fire, and lightning. And if you're super interested and motivated about this, you can just figure out how to get it into the calculator. Okay, but for me, I'm a simulator. I'm a simulation man. All right, that's me. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to simulate it. So I'm going to choose, again, I'm going to choose Chaos Orbs. And then now our condition, somehow this was already in here for tier 1 maximum life. So my conditions this time is, first of all, I have to have a tier 1 maximum life. Okay. Next, I'm going to add a condition group. So I want tier 1 maximum life, and I want count of minimum at least 2. So let me punch that in here. Sorry, I got kind of a weird setup here. So I want tier 1 maximum life, and I want at least 2 of the following things. So we're going to do cold resistance, lightning resistance, and fire resistance. Okay, so I've got this in here. Why did that change? I don't know. Okay, so what this simulation is now doing, it's a little bit more complicated. So now we're going to see if I use a bunch of chaos orbs, what's the probability that I'm going to get a tier 1 maximum life and also at least 2 perfect tier 1 cold, lightning, and fire resistances. So let's start simulating it. Okay, item rarity needs to be rare, as we already know. Let's turn it into a rare and let's start the simulation. So this one, okay, so this is one. Now let's just, hypothetically act like there is no way to get this configured to where it's like, what I just said. I just want 2 of the 3 of these. Okay, so if there was no way to put that into the calculator, which there's going to be lots of scenarios that you cannot put into the calculator, then this is what you would do. You would just start simulating it. And in this case, we're running into a situation where it's going to cost you a lot of chaos orbs to get that. Let's go back to our one that we had before. So this one was tier 1 or tier 2 life. And as I said, you can either derive the probability yourself, which is going to be about 7.8%, or you can just let this simulate. It's telling you it's going to be about 1 out of 13. It's going to cost about 13 chaos orbs, and the chance is about 7 point. It's basically kind of hovering around 7.5, 7.6, something like that. And when we were in here before and we saw it, when we clicked on this before, like this, and we have the 2, it's telling us, again, the odds are 7.6 or about 14 tries. We go back over to our simulation, we check it. It's sitting at about 7.6 and about 14 tries. So this is basically what you're going to find every time. If you come into here, and there's one more example that I want to show you. Okay, so I want to show you the which I've already actually set up in advance on this particular one. So I want to show you what it would be like to simulate using an alteration orb and then an orb of augmentation and then checking to see if you hit something. Okay, so let's do this now. All right, so let's say we want to start an item by starting it off with a tier 1 maximum life roll. This is actually like a pretty common scenario, I think. I think a person wants to like start their item by like hitting 1 or maybe 2 different things, and we'll do both scenarios, okay? Let's say you just want to make sure that you hit a maximum life, and what you plan on doing is you want to use an orb of alteration, and then you want to use an augment, and you want to hit a tier 1 maximum life. It's not exactly how you do it in real life probably, but let's just say. So this is how you're going to set up the simulation. Okay, first of all, you're going to take your starting item and you're going to go over here and you're going to start it at, you're going to start it at magic. Okay, so that we can use orb of alterations on it. I talked about this in my last video. Then the first step of our simulation is going to be using an orb of alteration. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So use the orb of alteration. This is what's going to be, it's automatic success. So use the orb of alteration. Now there's different ways you can set this up, but I just tried to make this as simple and easy to understand as possible. So I just did automatic success, go to the next step. So we've used the orb of alteration. Now go to the next step. Now over here, there's different options of using different currency. And there's also this condition check. So I'm often going to just use condition checks and I kind of split them up to make it easier to understand. So we've used the alteration, go to the next step. Now check the condition. The condition is, does it have an open prefix or an open suffix? So count 1 says it needs to have one of these 2 things, either an open prefix or an open suffix. And then I think it put that there for me automatically, count of 1. Okay. If it does have an open prefix or open suffix, it's going to be a success. And if it's success, then continue. And then the continue is to use an orb of augmentation. If it's a failure, then skip to step 4, which is going to check to see if I got my success, which is basically getting a tier 1 maximum life roll, which is what we're going for here. As you can see already, even for this very basic example, for a lot of you, I imagine this is probably going to already start looking kind of complex, and we haven't even really gotten very far yet, right? So we've got everything set up. Okay, so if it's got an open prefix or an open suffix, go forward, use an orb of augmentation, and then check. So if it goes continue, use the orb of augmentation. After you've used the orb of augmentation, no matter what happens, automatic success, just go to step 4, condition check for the maximum life roll. Okay. So let's go ahead and start running this simulation. Now, here's my question to you. What is the probability going to be of success in this simulation? We're using an orb of alteration, and then we're using an augment, and then we're checking on the condition. So when you use an alteration and an orb of augmentation, you should know this at this point because you've watched the subtractum basics video. You've guaranteed that you get a prefix and you've guaranteed that you get a suffix. If you've guaranteed you've got a prefix and you've got a suffix, then no matter what, you have one prefix, no matter what. If you have one prefix, then what are the odds that you've got a tier 1 maximum life roll? The odds are just what it says on the box. It's still just 1.939%. So when I do that simulation, once it's done, where is it at? It should end up giving me basically 1.39%. And assuming did I make a mistake here? It says tier 1 maximum life. So sometimes what ends up happening is when you start simulating things that are a little bit more rare, there's a lot more variability in this process. Again, if you start flipping a coin, sometimes it takes a long time for the percent and the probability to get close to 50%. Sometimes it takes a while. You have to flip the coin a whole bunch of times sometimes to get it to start to look close to the 50%. And the smaller and smaller that percentage chance gets, the smaller and smaller. And because we're doing so many steps, the simulation is taking longer. So if you can see, it's kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, just to do like 100 tries. And here you can look and see how fast this is going. It's going super fast because we have more steps on the other one. So what was I simulating here? Again, I've already kind of forgot. We were simulating getting a tier 2 or a tier 1 maximum life. Okay, let's go ahead and call it. Let's call it on this one. It's about 7.3, which we had already checked before. And we see, once again, okay, it's basically working perfectly. If we go for either one of these two and we did chaos orbs, the weight is around 7.6. It's about 14 tries. It's around 7.45. You know, it's close enough. Okay, it basically it got there. It's good enough for us. Now it's about to get back up to 7.6 probably. Okay, so this is kind of like the basics of simulation. Okay, so you've got two choices when you do your crafting. You can either try to understand the probabilities of everything, understand how all the orbs work, or use the calculator. But then when you get to more advanced crafts, the calculator won't do it for you. If you want to use like, a chaos and then follow it up with an exalted orb, you can't do that in the calculator. You have to go to the simulator. You have no choice. As soon as you do anything more complicated than like hitting it with a chaos or whatever, as far as I know, unless I'm making a mistake, I don't see any extra buttons here anywhere. You have no choice. You have to start going to the simulator. So as we start now working towards more complex crafts, more end game GG crafts, where you're going to use more than just one orb, you're going to use a series of orbs. You're going to say like, okay, hit it with a chaos orb until this happens. Then once that happens, maybe you do a split or something. Or you hit it with an exalted orb. If I get these two, if I get a tier 1 life and a tier 1 resistance, and that's it, maybe I'm going to hit it with an exalted orb. You can put that in the simulator. All right. So I've talked about most of the cases I want to talk about. I've talked about setting up a orb of alteration, orb of augmentation setup. So you can copy that if you want to try to do this and figure it out. But the thing about this that what I wanted to show is I just wanted to again show how it's kind of redriving this probability, which is, again, it's kind of funny that it's off. I did this before and it worked perfectly. So maybe sometimes you just get unlucky and it doesn't work out. So the final thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to show, let's just look at what like a more advanced simulation looks like. So let's say I'm in the simulator. Now the simulator has presets, okay? And the only presets it has is this, okay? It has alteration, augment, and regal. And you can basically choose like these outcomes. So let's go back to our example, okay? I want one prefix and two suffixes. Now I want to wrap this up at 30 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to cover this, but this is already how complicated it looks, and I'm willing to basically talk through how you would set all this up and do this if you wanted to do a more advanced craft like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and I'm just going to let y'all know like this would be kind of where we go next. Next, we would talk about simulating how you get the setup for like alteration, augment, regal, and then from there we'll just keep talking about more and more advanced simulation, how you set up all these parameters and do all these boxes. So if you want to basically go over more advanced cases, I'll talk about kind of the underlying base probabilities, and then we'll kind of show how to set up the simulation, and then we'll show them how the probabilities kind of match, and we'll just keep working up more and more and kind of more complex and complex. So I'm going to leave it there. let me know if that's something that you would be interested in seeing. I'll probably stop the video series here for now and kind of see what y'all think, and if that would be useful for learning these kind of things about simulation. Hopefully, I've made the point of how powerful this is once you get into more complicated scenarios to kind of derive the probabilities in an easy way.